351, I'm on scene. I'll be assuming Caroline Street Command. I got a 2.5-story wood occupied multiple dwelling. I got heavy fire from the second floor, Charlie side. I have an exposure on the Delta side. We have one line stretch not in operation yet. Primary searches are underway. Status of the fire is doubtful. One passing command. I'm on the first line. Just be advised, we're on scene. 2-story wood frame. I got heavy fire from the Alpha side.
Greetings, fans of the Volley Chief. Happy New Year. I hope everyone had a great holiday season. I took a couple weeks off. I headed down south, visited Mickey, and I'm back. So we're back with the first episode of the year, and I am definitely starting this year off with a bang. My special guest today is one of my lifelong friends in the fire service. We grew up about 2 blocks away from each other, so we're very intimate with each other. But I'm going to allow him to introduce himself.
Hello, Volley Chief Land. My name is Dan Mascolo. As David said, we grew up on the same street, lifelong friends. I've been in the fire service since 1997 when I started volunteering in Derby. It was a family thing, as my uncles and father were also volunteers. I joined the ambulance corps, the fire department, went to EMT school, rose through the ranks as a volunteer officer. I was first lieutenant, second lieutenant, and captain in the storm engine company. I acted as training officer in the storm engine company. In 2008, I was hired by a career fire department in Fairfield County, Connecticut, where I have since become a lieutenant since 2017. And I am the safety officer for the Derby Fire Department. And that's pretty much me at this point.
Yeah, Danny has been, again, you've been one of my closest friends for a long time. He's a great resource to have. You also left out the fact that you're a paramedic. You're very involved in hazmat, technical rescue.
I do all that also, yes.
Yes, you just said do.
I did.
And 9 out of 10 bad things I learned in my life, I learned from Danny.
It's good to be an influence on people.
So currently, Danny sits as the department safety officer for the Derby Fire Department. So tell us about that. Tell us the roles, responsibilities, what you're, striving for.
So about 3 years ago, as Chief Lenart was exiting his term as chief of department, he and Commissioner Gary Parker approached me and said, "Would you like to be the department's safety officer?" I said, "What does it involve? How could I help? And what are the qualifications?" So they gave me a list of things. You had to be a line officer. You had to have an incident safety officer. You needed quite a few things in order to be qualified to do this. I said, "I'll gladly do that. I think it's something that I could easily slide into." For many years in my full-time job, I was the chairperson of our safety committee for the fire department. So I said, sure, I'll gladly do this. Over the last 2 years, we've been slowly making some changes, whether it's with, I've brought in outside instructors for mental health. I've brought in outside instructors to show cancer mitigation and the risk of cancer within the fire service. And with certain new Connecticut acts and statutes, we're moving forward with that. As this is a volunteer service, it's hard for people to always come out, and people have bad months, bad quarters where they might not be able to attend things, family life, those types of things. So we're trying to make sure that all of our people that are responding have what they need to have to respond, that we're not behind in any means. And that's hard when you have a department of active firefighters, up to 100 active firefighters, to make sure that everybody has everything. And although we have our computer databases and those types of things, as whether it's a job or volunteer, people slip through the cracks. So currently we're in the first quarter of 2025, we're making sure that all of our interior members have their physicals done and their OSHA screening, so that we were able to start off this new year and new term very well. Chief Biggs, Tommy Biggs, was just sworn in as the department chief. We have scheduled some traffic incident management classes coming up to have our officers and drivers up to date on the newest way for traffic, for where to park, how to block, keep our members safe.
And that's and for content, Derby has two state highways that run through it. We have Route 34, which is more, it's a 4-lane highway, but more local.
Yes, it's a little larger than a Route 1 type thing. It's a thoroughfare between highways. So we have Route 8, which is one of the main highways that goes between 95 and 84, and we have Route 34, which goes between Route 8 to Route 15 to 95. So
one of the oddities about the location of Derby is if you make a triangle between Waterbury, New Haven, and Bridgeport, which are 3 of Connecticut's biggest cities, Derby sits right in the middle.
Yes.
And the highway system allows an intersection between Route 34 goes from New Haven to Danbury, Route 8 goes from Bridgeport up through Waterbury. So, traffic for us is a problem. And we have a very short stretch of Route 8. It's a limited access highway. And the amount of what makes it, from our standpoint, unique is it's a limited access highway, but it's bendy.
It is bendy. There's a lot of steep on and off ramps and bridges in our short section.
Correct.
And make response more concerning as a safety side of it.
And I mean, rough guess. I mean, we're at the highway. I honestly would probably say between around 150 times to 200 times a year.
Yes.
And that's, and you look at our call volume.
I'm saying probably, you're correct. Probably about 3-4 times a week we're going on a highway.
Right. And I mean, the minute it rains, the minute it snows, the minute the weather changes, you could go park on the highway.
Yes, without a doubt.
And I agree. I think, I've said it before on the show. One of my relieving things about the town of Somers is Somers has no limited access highway. And spending my career like you, where we've had Route 8, we've had Route 34, and then in our career jobs we have 95.
Yep. And Route 15.
And I mean, it is the highway is probably one of the most dangerous places that we commonly go to.
I've said it to, as everybody that's listening to this podcast know, everybody's going to ask, what was it like going into a fire? What was the worst thing you've seen? What are all those things? Do you get nervous or scared? As a safety officer and a lieutenant, the thing that makes me the most concerned is going to the highway. People don't slow down. They're in a rush to get everywhere, and we're trying to help people. And it gets difficult because you're focused on your accident, you're focused on your patients or extrication or car fire, and people are going 75 miles an hour behind you. Even if they slow down, they're going 50. And that's huge to take in. They're driving a 2, 3, sometimes tens of thousands of pound vehicle through my office. And that's very nerve-wracking to keep the members safe, to keep myself safe. Highways and major roadways are an extremely dangerous area.
Right. And it's just one of those things, right? Like it's our district happens to have a unique stretch of it that requires a lot of our attention. One of the oddities again about Connecticut is when we were young, and we never really took advantage of it, but there used to be this like obscure law in Connecticut where every time the volunteer fire department got dispatched to the highway, like they would pay the department, I think it was like $25 or $50 back then. Every time you went, it was like for being on a state highway. And about 3-4 years ago, they changed it. And now it's, how much is it? It's a significant amount of money.
It is. I believe it's $150. I could be wrong.
It's something I probably should know because I dealt with it. But, it's a good vig for going up on the highway.
Yeah.
And and now it's become seriously worth it. And in Connecticut, the way that the way that the statute was written was that the payment has to be made directly to the volunteer fire company.
Fire department. It does not go to the town. No.
Right. And that was, specifically crafted by the legislators who crafted it. And it's a good law because it gives the volunteer departments, it gives them a crazy amount of money to go to the highway. So like I had mentioned, I'm trying to Google quick as we're talking to look through here. And it was first enacted in 1959 that they had the program. It was updated in 1981. It was done in 1959, but they had to pause it because it was too good, I guess you'd say, right?
Here's the thing, though: if the volunteers weren't out there doing it, the state's going to have to be out there doing it, or a career department. This incentive was something just to help the departments, whether it be
500.
Okay, 500. So
500. So
yeah.
we were just talking about doing 150 calls a year.
Yeah.
Up to the highway, and that's 75 grand.
Yeah.
It's a major funding source. God, we gotta get a limited access highway.
So I know last year when there was some turmoil with how this money is dispersed, the city of Derby was owed over $30,000. So that's a significant amount of money when you're budgeting for volunteer fire departments.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you think about, the Derby Fire Department budget is roughly $250,000, and even though it's a volunteer department, a chunk of that is salary. Mm-hmm. And then you look at I believe the new equipment line item was around $20,000 to $25,000. So throwing another, like you said, $30,000 into that mix is a huge
amount
benefit. Yep.
It's over 10% of the budget that we did.
I'm proud of that math right there. That was serious. That was. You can sit down now.
Yeah. So
what else besides the highway stuff? What else as the safety officer are you prioritizing?
Simple things, like I said, physicals, all your mandated things. And again, people who do this as a job only don't realize that a lot of these things are hard to keep up with. You have people that have been there for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. The years start to blend together. To get people to always stay current in all those topics is hard to do. Simple things like cancer, like I said, cancer mitigation. I had Still Responding come in and speak last year. Things like washing your gear, wiping down after fires, gross decon coming out of a fire. All these things keep us safer. We currently just applied for the AFG grant to have climate vents put in our firehouses. Our firehouses are very aged, we'll say. It's still in working order for the most part, but they're aged. So it's not just safety on the fire ground, it's safety as a whole. These people are giving of themselves for free. Let's try to keep them as safe as possible, whether it be with our apparatus, like I said, in the station, or whatever we could do. Moving forward, I'd like to see some safety factors come in. A lot of people these days, we train on RIT, we train on certain topics as our safety type thing. And RIT's a very important thing. Simple classes of building construction, reading smoke, and knowing what we're facing could mitigate a lot of those problems too. So hopefully within the next year, we have some officer development come in and try to show some off the fire ground safety improvements as well.
Right. And the other thing too that people need to realize is that you are truly the department safety officer. You're not just an incident safety officer.
No.
Right. I mean, you are right. You are the incident safety officer when there is a fire, there's a large scale incident, but you are also the department safety officer year round. The fire department in Derby has 4 chiefs, head chief and 3 assistants, and you're the offshoot that handles safety. Yes. And I agree. We've gone down this road numerous times. When OSHA knocks on the door, you're the key star because you've got all that the annual training, the physicals, the fit testing, all in your wheelhouse.
Yes.
A lot of departments have a quote unquote designated safety officer, especially volunteer departments, but I don't know many of them that engage as much as you.
Yeah. Well, simple things like accidents. Like we have in our line of work, we have apparatus that goes over the road. Apparatus that goes over the road, it's going to get in an accident. It's not if we're going to get in an accident, it's when. And you could be as safe as you want. You could have the best drivers, best personnel. Accidents happen. And I know people say motor vehicle accidents can be avoided if all rules are followed. That's a little weird perspective to me. But simple things, a scratch on a door, the insurance claims for something like that, to make sure that the person wasn't the driver potentially is under the influence, to see who was in the wrong. All these come in to my office, and all of them get at some point an investigation. It could be as simple as the chief that responded said, "Hey, it was a garbage can rolled out into the road. There was no particular fault. The driver was fine. Everybody was fine. We chalk it up as, hey, here's a police report number, minimal damage. Everybody's okay." And it gets logged. But those simple things all need to be documented and written up.
Right. And again, I think it's a great program that the Derby Fire Department has, where we have that designated safety officer. We have, job description. The process for it was pretty simple. It's pretty standard for any job. So in Derby, we created a job description, brought it to the city board of aldermen. They approved the board of aldermen. When they did that, we had to, you get a small stipend for the position. And then we wrote, the SOP for both the safety officer, and then there's a separate SOP for incident safety officer, because obviously being you're good, but you can't be two places at once. So there's multiple, in Derby, the officers all have to be trained to incident safety officers so that they can step into that role if you are at work, if you're doing your job.
Yes.
So it's a very good program, and
it's been adapted pretty much by the towns around us also.
Yeah,
where Derby originally had in the beginning, like your brother, and then we had Jesse, who's now one of our chiefs, and then I've stepped in, and Sonia and Seymour have both now adopted safety officers for fire ground tactics in department wide.
Right, and the nice thing about the position was it was a good effort, and we actually had some ringers brought in, right? I believe Commissioner Kelleher was there when we wrote the SOP and we did it. It was one of the first things I took on as an assistant chief. But yeah. I have to say, and to give credit, we had the ace in the hole of Chief McHugh, who's the Greenwich Fire Chief. He's formerly a safety chief from the New York City Fire Department. So we did have a tremendous resource that we were able to pull in and help us. And I can remember a couple of nights of meetings back and forth with him to help us, and he helped write it. And then, like you said, the first person, Tommy, had just finished being chief, so we thought it was a good way to keep him in the fold. And then from Tommy, Jesse, and then you, and it's been a great position that we've had.
And it's a position that in both of our careers, well, your last career and my current career, that has been enacted, and it's been enacted nationwide for the fact that people are understanding that safety on the fire ground and safety in the firehouse is paramount, not only for our members, who we want everyone to go home at the end of their shift and be retired for as long as they were serving their community or working. It also helps the city and the department by having these standards, by holding people to some accountability. And it's a win for everybody that's willing to, I don't want to say buy into it, but it's a win for anybody who wants to see how much this could cover and show the progression to a safer environment, a healthier environment and decrease the risks of injuries and on-the-job exposures.
All right, so a couple of random questions here.
Sure.
What was your first fire?
My first fire that I went into was North Avenue in Derby. It was Louis Tiano was driving, and it was myself, Louis Awa, Jay and Matt Salem, and Chris Realstone. And I remember we went in through the front door, and I was so nervous, so ungodly nervous. And I had been to calls before, but I had never gone inside at that point. And these three animals in front of me, being Louis and Jay and Matt, went right in and did a phenomenal job. And I was like, wow, that was awesome. And I was kind of taken back at that moment. Fast forward to literally the next week, we had the fire in the old horse barn on 5th Street, the horse area for the old firehouses. And it wound up being Matt Ellis and I, and we were the first ones in. And it was not as nerve-wracking. Still have that unsettling feeling because you're so new. But having that first exposure and seeing these guys go in and be okay, to then Matt and I going in the next time, it was pretty the difference in that 1 week was pretty amazing. And complacency kills, but to know and have experience has always been very valuable. And I was with some experienced people, even for their age at that point. So I vividly remember those two fires as my first two fires.
And that had to be, I mean, that's like 2000, that's early, right?
No,
early 2000s or late 90s?
Late 90s, because I had just turned 18, so it had to be either 98 or 99.
God, you're old.
Yeah, I'm old. Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say one of my favorite fires was definitely when you almost ran over the arsonist on Hawthorne Ave.
Yeah. I almost ran him over with my Jeep. Yeah.
With your Jeep. Yeah. As a matter of fact, right, Danny and I worked every Tuesday on the ambulance together here in Derby, 6 to 6. And then normally we would stay overnight and cover the ambulance on the volunteer side.
Yep.
And that night, right, Pigeon stopped down the firehouse because Little Pigeon left his
we had just gotten back Pigeon from Roger Williams.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Pigeon had stopped down the firehouse because Little Pigeon left a book home.
Yep.
And he needed to bring it up there. So we were like, oh, we'll take a ride. And we had left by, we had just got back because I remember I just made it into bed when the tone went in.
Yep.
And what had happened was it was a domestic and the guy lit the building. And, when the call came in, Danny was driving to the firehouse and he drove by the fire building and the guy who lit it ran out in front and you almost hit him.
Yep. That was the early 2000s. Yeah.
That was definitely early 2000s.
Yep.
And, what other ones? Come on, hit me with some more.
We've had a few. I mean, how many times has Derby Cellular caught on fire, or we had Roseland itself catch on fire, a couple on Route 34. I mean, these fires all have happened in our what would be our first due, and it's the same names and faces. Just different generations as the years go by. These fires have, like I said, taught us many things to the point where you're chief of a department and many of the other people that were at those fires are all either chiefs or line officers throughout the state. You look at our upgrades that we had when I believe that you were line officer and I was just about to be a line officer, that Alan made with our radios and our pass devices. That was huge for us in safety in the, again, early 2000s, for us to have the pass devices and that system with the little box that notified us if one of our pass devices went off. Our upgrades to our radios. You figure in the late 90s, all of our riding spots didn't have radios.
Correct. And when Danny and I first joined, the engine had one portable on it, and that was it. And then the company officers, the two lieutenants and the captain, they were issued a portable, and the engine actually had the radio. The only reason that we lucked out and always had radios was because we were EMTs on the ambulance.
Yep.
And the EMTs on the ambulance got a portable because you were, responding from home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the simple things in my short time in the fire service as a volunteer, seeing thermal imaging cameras come in, seeing our pass alarms, seeing radios be assigned to each riding position, all these things.
Bunker gear.
Bunker gear. When we first started, we still had the 3/4 boots and rental helmets on the rigs.
Right.
And by rental helmets, I mean our rigs had some 3/4 boots, long coats, and a helmet. They were different colors than our normal. They were like the helmet was red and those types of things. That was just gear to have on the rig in case you just went straight to the call. And now our gear has surpassed anything that anybody would have thought 25, 30 years ago, let alone 50 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it's just such a different realm, but it's the same, right? Like, you see how much changes, but a lot of the faces stay the same. And we've been in where were you for latex? Were you there?
Yeah, I had just gotten out of AMR. I worked overnight. I went home and I was sitting in my backyard at my parents' house, right down the street from your parents' house. And my father pulled in. My father was a bus driver. And I was just sitting in the backyard having a cup of coffee before I went inside to go to bed. And he said, "Hey, there's a fire in Ansonia." And I said, oh, all right. And then not 2 minutes later, I looked up towards Ansonia and I saw the black cloud. I drove to the firehouse and I wound up driving Hazmat 19 over to the fire. I parked on the bridge. I walked over and I wound up being on a line with Dominic Wichter at one point, God rest his soul. And then it wound up being me, Ricky Valenti, and a few other people on the Alpha Bravo corner. And I was definitely there for that one. That was a long day, couple days. So
it was a very long day.
But I drove 19 there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean it's funny though, because, I have the 50th anniversary setup coming up of the BF Goodrich fire. And like I laugh because I say, you think about it, when we joined and my father and Artie and Len and Joe would talk about all that, it was that long ago.
Uh-huh.
And you would be like, oh God, that fire happened forever ago. And that, I'm like, now you think about us, like when we talk about latex, it's the same time frame.
It is the same time frame. And I remember hearing Artie and even people like Dottie Margiano, your father, talk about BF Goodrich. And I was like, I don't see with fire inspection, with sprinklers, with all that. And granted, BF Goodrich was arson, but I never thought there'd be that size fire again without catastrophic intervention, like an arson or some sort of event that triggered it.
Right.
Now, the latex foam, I mean, how many little fires did Anthony DeLucia and Jay and Matt put out in latex foam before that happened?
Well, it's funny you bring that up. We could just ask him. Matt, how many fires do you think you put out in latex foam before it burned?
Half dozen or so, little
right. Now, you missed it because about 2 minutes ago, Danny just credited his entire career in the fire service to you. He said you took him into his first fire.
He did take me into a first. Do you remember the fire on North Avenue? Probably 1998. It was me, you, Louie, and your brother. Just below Hawthorne Avenue.
Yes.
Yep. And that was my first interior fire.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
I feel
so joining us is Matt Salem. Matt is another member of our group, right? We all grew up together, lived a few blocks from each other, joined the Storms around the same time together.
Yeah.
Matt's been a career firefighter now for how long?
Just over 23 years.
See, wow, man,
I
imagine that.
started
We're
my
hitting
24th year in September.
right, and
I'm a year behind Tommy. He
okay.
started in Greenwich before I did in Stratford. Yeah.
So Danny and I were just talking about Danny's, early first fires and stuff like that. And Matt, what was your first?
Oh boy, I gotta try to remember this now. Wow. Well, I think we joined in March of '95. You know what? I really don't remember actually. I think we had a little drought.
Right, the beginning of '95. The beginning of '95 started off good, right? We had Elizabeth Street, Cottage Street, Olivia that built the house 2 down from the Storms.
Yeah,
and then, like you said, I think from there we went into a little bit of the drought. I'm trying to think. I know, like I remember the first like big fire that we had, like was the barn burner, on 34. What was it? Field or what's the name of the Heinz's farm on Route 34?
Yeah, and I was out of state. That's the one where Louis pushed the police car with engine 12.
With engine 12, right?
Yeah, I was in New Jersey that day, so I actually missed that far.
Right. Oh, I see. You know what the problem is? I'm thinking I was with your brother. That's what I was thinking of you, but I must have been with your brother.
Yeah, they always say you remember your first, right? I don't know. I'm just drawing a blank.
The sad part is though, it's how long has it been? It's been 30
almost
years.
30 years.
30 years, yeah.
And Matt, and one of the things I love about you and Jay, like you're probably the last. They lived about less than a block from the firehouse, so you're probably the last in the valley of guys that ran to the firehouse when there was a call.
If the people that I don't even know if they're still alive today, but they used to see me and my brother running in like our tank tops and shorts, or sometimes even just underwear and shirts and socks just to the firehouse, like because we live so close. They probably look at these two knuckleheads or crazy kids, you know.
Right. It was different back then. I mean, we used to leave school. We would, I just want to point out that this is my first threesome on the podcast here. This is the first time I've had 2 guests.
I'm glad I could be a part of it.
Yeah. It's funny, like even whether you talk about stuff from like the Valley area or if you reminisce of stuff at work, and we all work in different departments, but you forget a lot of the calls you go on until somebody mentions one thing, and then you start a bunch of other things start flooding in, and it's just over time. And
how many people, right? Like Danny, I just wrote down in my notes here as we were talking. You mentioned Donnie Margiano.
Yeah.
Right. And Donnie he was a captain of the Storms. He was a sergeant in the Derby Police Department. He was a Marine veteran. And Donnie was one of those guys, right? He was a street cop, and he had that common sense about him. And like I was thinking, like I when I was cleaning out my locker in Bridgeport, when my last night, I was going through and I had a file of old stuff, and in it I had reference letters, right? Because throughout our lives we've collected reference letters, and I had a reference letter from 1996 from Donnie Margiano, and like I said, I can't throw that out. I got to keep it.
No.
Right. You mentioned Louis Tiano. We talked about Len. We talk about Trunk.
I said Trunk at Latex Foam. I mean, Trunk and Jay were lucky to escape with their lives that day, and then any other time, they would have went to a hospital or did something else or been taken away. 10 minutes later, Trunk was on a line with me. It wasn't.
I remember years back. I know it was one of our early on in our fireman careers. We had a fire on Smith Street. Me and my brother, Peanut, we stretched the hand line going into the second floor, and everybody wanted to be on the nozzle, and we made a mistake. We all bunched up, and we left a bunch of kinks downstairs out in the alleyway. And Louis Al later that day pointed out like that we messed up, and we ended up being like 30 feet short because of the kinks. So
Matt, was that the one? It was like a weird layout where it was like you had to walk along a driveway, and then it was almost like there was two houses where you had to go like up a staircase then back towards the front.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. and it was on the seaside. They had fire coming out. I believe it was the bedroom windows, and we came up the stairs. And then where the living room or computer room was, all that stuff was off gassing and starting to melt.
Sean Bashura was with us up there.
Yep. We went down the hallway, and then the older guys were mad at us for making a mistake, but they pointed out our mistake at the end because we had to call for an extra line, and then you learn from your mistakes.
Right, and I try to explain to people. I still to this day, and I would die on this hill, and I think the two of you would. We are, and I'm not trying to be. We are as good as we are because of that group before us. Because
I was waiting for you to finish.
Yeah, they knew how important it was to teach us how to do everything, and
their teaching method wasn't the book method. It wasn't, hey, here's how you do it. Their teaching method was literally and figuratively trial by fire. They put you in the scenario, and it was kind of like having a little guardian angel over you to do the job, regardless of where it was, whether it's a fire, an extrication, on the water. These guys had fun when they were younger, being EMTs and firefighters, and they passed that on in a very strong way. And I tried telling, whether it's Butchie, Alan, Deej, your father, Nez, the Antonazis. I mean, those guys, the Pigeon. I always think of Pigeon as.
Oh, thank God you mentioned him because we'd hear it.
Yeah, I always think of Pigeon as like, because he hangs out and does those types of things. Like he's right at our age, but you forget that Pigeon's got a good 15, 20 on us, and those guys taught us by allowing us to make mistakes and do the job. It was, they were very freeing for us to allow us to do what we did and learn from them.
Right. But they never did it like, I always say, like, I remember in Shelton at the laundromat fire, we had to breach a wall, and, Fadouk and we're going to go through this wall. I'm right behind you. If you get into any trouble, let me know, and I'll yank you back. And I was more afraid about Fadouk and yanking me back. Right? But that's how those guys were. Like, they just, I tell everyone, you take the, and we're all on career jobs, you take the senior man role. They were the perfect senior men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
when you're young and when you're like, when we were 15 turning 16, you don't realize until you look back now at, when in our mid 40s, where how lucky we are to have those every guy you just mentioned, and there's a few more from the knowledge and experience that we were just in a good spot. And like today, the kids can't be firemen, like real firemen, until they're 18. And when you tell people, oh yeah, when I was 16, we went in and we did this, or we used to go to the fire school in Derby, and we did. Yep. They probably don't believe you because the kids can't do the things. We were exposed to stuff that normal teenagers, even in this area, even in New England. Well, yeah, 16, you're fighting fires and going to extrications and being EMTs. It was the best thing that ever happened, at least for us as young adults.
Who did we miss, Matt? Who did we miss? We got
Kenny Spodnik.
And then I listened to your interview the other day or last week, but I think it was a few months ago. Tom DeMarco.
Tommy DeMarco.
Oh, man, that guy's he's the man.
Yeah.
Just the history. Yeah, as I said, I didn't. We mentioned him quickly, but Louis Alloa.
Louis, yeah.
Do you guys remember the VHS fire tapes?
Yes.
Yeah, those aren't the VHS tapes I thought you were going to bring up.
No,
That's right.
Yeah. So the VHS fire tapes, I tried explaining that to a couple of the guys at work. We would watch VHS fire tapes, and then it's kind of like doing a tabletop. Long before tabletops were in the fire service, it was just a military type thing. We would watch VHS fire tapes and then talk about it. And how many times did we go out at night to say that we were 10-8 and drive around and do dumb fireman stuff?
Right.
Because we had that leeway.
Yeah.
You go to like Bridgeport and Waterbury, with Anthony. I remember going to Waterbury with Anthony so many times. Yep. And the guys on the job then would look at these little whackers running around.
Right.
It was just funny, but just to get the exposure, it's awesome. And it was awesome.
And I'm thinking too. I'm thinking the Bashuras.
Oh yeah,
right.
Sean and Jay Bashura.
Sean and Jay Bashura. I hate to say this, we Pat Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I mean, Pat was right there with us for all of that.
Yeah.
Matt came a little longer, right?
Right. But Matt came in a little bit later.
Matt Ellis, Chris Reels.
Ellis.
I mentioned Ellis in Real Sound. Yeah.
Matt, besides texting you, I texted Peanut to jump on this. So he didn't reply, but
I think he worked on something. So, yeah. It's like I said, and we speak about this openly, but it was different and again, guys older than us are going to say it was different in the 70s and 80s, but it was different in the 90s, that even the late 90s, that we could go out and do these things and learn how to hit hydrants, pull lines, do extrication, mess around with ropes, because there wasn't as many of the regulations that we have now. Granted, those regulations have made us safer and able to do our jobs. It's hard to have that culture, though, that we had 30 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it, nowadays, and it's, like you said, it's kind of counterintuitive, but if you said to me, hey, we're going to take this 16-year-old kid and get him ready to go into a fire, I'd laugh and I'd say, no, you're not. But, but here we were leaving Derby High, right?
Yeah. Then, even when I switch high schools, I hear Matt Slem to the office, and I hear your grandfather yelling in the background. Screaming? What's taking this kid so long? An FD10's parked out in front of the Emmett O'Brien when I switched high schools, and he's yelling at me for not leaving. And we would just go do the ambulance call and go back.
Yeah. Or if you were lucky, you got to go to McDonald's for breakfast.
Oh yeah, I still to this day, your grandfather, he would just chug those piping hot coffees.
Oh.
And then we decide not to go back to school the rest of the day. And just
right. Just
our house.
Yeah.
And then you said something like back to basics, in the fire service, and in today's world with all the different magazines and this and that, whether you have like 5 years in the fire service, 10, or whether you go through like a fire academy, you get on the job, then you get people coming into the fire service, whether it's through a career agency or a basic firefighter one. The guys can't even stretch hand lines, and it's like we talk at the coffee table. Like, what the heck do they do in the fire academies or these firefighter 1 and 2 classes where guys don't even know how to throw ground ladders? And then it's I don't know if this is the proper conversation to be having in this type of podcast, but back to basics and keeping it simple. I know things evolve and things change in the fire service, but pull a hand line and throw a ground ladder, hit a hydrant. It's
it. That's it though, Matt. You're 100% right. It's the basics of the job. Can you stretch a line? Can you throw a ground ladder?
And it doesn't matter if you're in New York, California, Chicago, Derby, Connecticut, or wherever. Stretch your hand line and get it done properly and get it in place and get in water. Yeah.
Well, hey, listen, we're rapidly approaching my longest episode ever. And Dan, I guess we'll do a part 2 because I really want to talk to you about the mental health stuff. Matt, thanks for popping in.
I was caught off guard. I didn't realize I was going to be coming on live or before it, but yeah. But it was fun, and it goes by quick. And then you start reminiscing on things, and never mind on the EMS side of things. It's seen over the years, and like with the nut bags, and I don't even know if we're allowed to say that anymore. Sorry.
Dan, anything closing thoughts?
No. I want to thank you and obviously Matt. I think that you could tell just from our between our text groups and our conversations that the bond that is forged doing what we do is a lifelong thing, and I think it's a very special opportunity that we've all been afforded through our hard work and to have these conversations and have the friends that we have. And yes, I'd love to come back on another day to speak about mental health. That's one of the topics that I'm fond of. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to doing it again.
All right, Matt, thanks for jumping on and
no
crashing.
Problem. Take care.
All right, guys. Thank you.
See you later.
Bye-bye, Danny.
Bye.
AFD-1's back in service. Commands terminated.